It was a warm afternoon in the town of Sychar, where the sun cast a golden glow over the hills and vineyards. The well outside the city gates stood silent, a relic of Jacob's time, surrounded by whispers of history and countless footsteps of travelers. Few came to the well at noon. The heat was too much and the day too bright for most. But on this day, a solitary woman approached, carrying a heavy clay jar. Her steps were measured, almost hesitant, as though she were used to being unseen, yet wary of being seen. The well outside the city gates stood silent, a relic of Jacob's time, surrounded by whispers of history. Her name was Miriam, though few called her by it. To the townspeople, she was a shadow of scandal, a woman whose life was spoken of in hushed tones and sidelong glances. She bore their judgment quietly, accustomed to the sting of their rejection. The well was her refuge, a place where she could escape the whispers and the looks, at least for a while. As she neared the well, she saw someone sitting there, a man, plainly dressed, but with a presence that made her pause. He was unlike anyone she'd seen before, his eyes steady and kind, his demeanor calm. She hesitated, debating whether to turn back, but the weight of her jar and the thirst that drove her forward kept her moving. "Will you give me a drink?" the man asked, his voice breaking the silence. His tone was neither demanding nor dismissive, but curious, as though he was speaking to an equal. Miriam froze, startled. A man, a Jewish man, was speaking to her, a Samaritan woman. This was unheard of. Her instinct was to retreat, but something in his voice rooted her in place. "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman," she said cautiously. "How can you ask me for a drink?" The man's lips curved into a faint smile. "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Miriam frowned. Her curiosity piqued despite herself. "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well?" The man's gaze remained steady, filled with a patience that disarmed her. "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again," he said. "But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give will become in them a spring of water, welling up to eternal life." Miriam's heart quickened. The words he spoke resonated deep within her, touching a part of her that longed for something more. "Sir, give me this water," she said, "so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." The man's expression softened, and his next words pierced her like an arrow. "Go, call your husband and come back." She lowered her gaze, her shame rising to the surface. "I have no husband," she said quietly. "You are right when you say you have no husband," he replied. "The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband." "What you have just said is quite true." Miriam's eyes widened, a mix of fear and awe washing over her. How could he know? Who was this man who saw her so clearly? Her instinct was to deflect, to steer the conversation away from her shame. "Sir," she said, "I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." The man's response was gentle yet profound. "A time is coming when you will worship the Father, neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. True worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in spirit and in truth." Her breath caught. Could it be true? Could this be the answer she had been seeking, the truth she had yearned for but never dared to hope for? "I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us," she said, her voice trembling with hope. The man looked at her, his eyes shining with a light that seemed to pierce her very soul. "I, the one speaking to you, I am he." Time seemed to stand still. Miriam's heart pounded as the weight of his words settled over her. This was no ordinary man. This was the Messiah, the one who knew her deepest secrets and still spoke to her with kindness and grace. Her shame, her pain, her brokenness, all of it seemed to melt away under his gaze. She left her jar at the well and ran back to the town, her feet moving as though carried by a force greater than herself. "Come, see a man who told me everything I ever did," she called out to anyone who would listen. Could this be the Messiah? The townspeople, drawn by her urgency and the change in her demeanor, followed her to the well. Many of them believed because of her testimony, but when they heard him for themselves, their belief deepened. They begged him to stay, and he spent 2 days among them, teaching and healing, his presence transforming their lives. We must be reminded that no matter how dark our past may be, Jesus is always willing to rescue us. Even if you think you are the worst person on earth, Jesus has enough room to accommodate you. Just surrender your life to him today, and he will save you.